that he would survive the ordeal. His tortured, heart-rending prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane and his cry upon the cross furnish strong testimony that Jesus himself believed that he would survive the crucifixion. It must be explained, however, why Jesus did not want to die on the cross, apart from, of course, the obvious. The reason is related to the statement in the Old Testament. Once again, please. I'm just going to have to speak louder, which I'm perfectly capable of doing, as some of you who know me know. Where was I? Oh, yes. His tortured, heart-rending prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane and his cry upon the cross furnish strong testimony that Jesus himself believed that he would survive the crucifixion. It must be explained, however, why Jesus did not want to die upon the cross. The reason is related to the statement in the Old Testament in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 23, that states, he who is hanged is accursed of God. This hanging upon wood was always taken to mean crucifixion by commentators of the Old Testament. Therefore, his fear of crucifixion may very well indicate a fear that he would be proved by the Jewish law itself to be a false prophet and accursed of God. To be accursed of God means to be put at a distance from God and out of God's love. Evidently, a man who is accursed of God cannot claim to be the Son of God, either literally or metaphorically. The third evidence from the Gospel is the dream of Pontius Pilate's wife in Matthew chapter 27, verse 19. It is written, when Pilate was sitting in court, a message came to him from his wife. Have nothing to do with that innocent man. I was troubled on his account in my dreams last night. The question that begs to be asked is, why would God send an angel to plead for the life of Jesus to the magistrate's wife, if indeed God's ultimate purpose was that he should die there? The only purpose the dream could serve would be to incline Pilate's mind towards the innocence of Jesus. The fourth evidence comes from the logistics of the crucifixion and Pilate's hand in the events. Pilate, clearly perhaps under the influence of his wife's testimony just cited, had an interest in saving Jesus' life while attempting to stay within the confines of the Roman law. This is shown in three ways. Firstly, Pilate set the crucifixion day just before the Sabbath. It is well known that the Sabbath day begins with the sunset on Friday and extends to the sunset of Saturday. It is less well known that it was against the Jewish law that any person should hang on the cross on the Sabbath day. Pilate well knew that it was highly unlikely for a young man like Jesus to die after only 6 hours on the cross, when it sometimes took up to 8 or 9 days to die. Secondly, when the time came to remove Jesus and the two thieves from the cross, Jesus' opponents asked Pilate to break his legs. Then the Jews, because it was the day of preparation, so that the bodies would not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day, asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. John chapter 19, verse 31. However, the centurions, acting on Pilate's command, did not break the legs of Jesus, while they did break the legs of the two thieves on either side of him. But coming to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead. They did not break his legs. John chapter 19, verse 33. It was because he had taken these precautionary measures that Pilate was surprised when he was told that Jesus was already dead. And Pilate marveled if he were already dead. And calling him unto the centurion, he asked him whether he had been dead for long. Mark chapter 15, verse 44. Pilate, a man who knew of how much Jesus had suffered through his scourging and imprisonment the night before, was still surprised when told that Jesus had died after only 6 hours on the cross without having his legs broken. It should be noted that the scriptural attention to not breaking the legs can only be meaningful if the body was alive. It is meaningless to note and relate such an incident if Jesus was already a corpse. Finally, Roman protocol was that the body, once taken down from the cross, should be left on the ground to the mercy of the elements and the wild animals, unless the body was bought. Pilate, however, went completely against protocol when he gave Joseph of Arimathea the body of Jesus without even asking for any money. The fifth evidence we find in the Gospels is of a medical nature. To elicit a response and thus determine whether Jesus was dead or alive, The Roman centurion pierced Jesus' side with a spear, whereupon it is recorded that blood and water gushed out. John in chapter 19 verse 34 calls it a sudden flow of blood and water. The first thing to note is that nothing ever suddenly flows out of a dead body. The heart is still and stops acting as a pump. The gushing blood and the lack of coagulation, as only happens in a living body, clearly indicate that Jesus was not yet clinically dead. His heart was still beating. Many biblical commentators believe that this thrusting of the spear to cut Jesus' side was to kill him, but this cannot be true. For on the one hand, we are told that the Roman guards did not break his legs, did not break his bones because they thought he was dead, and on the other hand, we are told that the Roman guards thrust a spear into him to kill him. It is obvious that the two positions are contradictory. Moreover, if the intention of the spear thrust had been to kill Jesus, they would have thrust the spear into the center of his chest, not cut him on the side. The spear thrust is evidently a primitive method of seeing if a person is dead. If a response came from the body, he was taken to be still alive. If no response was present, then the body was taken to be dead. No response was elicited from Jesus, and so he was taken as dead. The sixth evidence is one which, if rejected, would amount to the rejection of every other type of historical evidence. We refer to the ointment of myrrh and aloes that was prepared for Jesus by Joseph of Arimathea and applied to Jesus' wounds after he had been laid in the sepulchre. Nicodemus, who had first come to him by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds in weight. John chapter 19, verse 39. Despite the statement of John that it is a Jewish custom to apply myrrh and aloe to a dead body, it is well known that in reality it has never been a practice of the Jewish people to apply myrrh or aloes to their dead. To this day, it is not a practice of it is not a Jewish custom to do so. The only reason to apply myrrh and aloes to a body would be to heal it. These plants, particularly aloe plants, are medicinal. Aloe was used extensively in many ancient cultures and is even used today to soothe open wounds. The Roman physician Pedanius Dioscorides in circa 75 BC recommended aloe for wounds and skin conditions. Alexander the Great's mentor, Aristotle, persuaded him to capture the island of Socotra to harvest the aloe plants for treating wounded soldiers. Moreover, the ingredients of the myrrh and aloes applied to Jesus have, remarkably, been preserved for the past 2,000 years in a hugely varied set of medical textbooks. Medical authorities from every background and every one of the three Abrahamic faiths have studied and have known of the famous ointment, which is called in many textbooks as Marhami Isa, which means the ointment of Jesus. It is found in no less than 1,000 medical textbooks spread over a period of the last 2,000 years. Physicians as renowned as Avicenna and famous Greek textbooks such as Pharmacopoeia all record this ointment. In the original Latin and Greek texts, the ingredients of the ointment are often followed by the mention that this was the ointment that was prepared for the injuries sustained by Jesus on the cross. There are 12 ingredients that go into its preparation, and this was specifically noted in both the originals and the later translations, as it was representative of the 12 disciples of Jesus. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad in his book writes that it is also worth noting that though old coins are very useful in solving the great secrets of history, ancient books which had been known to millions of people throughout the centuries and have been taught as textbooks at important seats of learning and are still being used, are 1,000 times more valuable than coins and inscriptions. In short, Marhami Isa, or the ointment of Jesus, constitutes a very important testimony for seekers after truth. Can one ignore with impunity such a strong piece of evidence, and can one doubt such incontrovertible testimony which has encompassed all of Europe, Asia, and which is the result of the combined testimony of famous Jewish, Christian, Magian, and Muslim philosophers? The next piece of evidence is that when Mary Magdalene saw Jesus, she took him to be a gardener because he was dressed in the clothes of one. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." John chapter 20, verse 15. This shows that he had disguised himself and did not want to be discovered. This behavior makes no sense if he had indeed risen from the dead. Having gone through the travails of hell and having risen from the dead, was he still afraid of being apprehended